Chocolatey cream smell.
Before your eyes.
Some people use a little oil or butter when they cook so that things don't stick to the pan. But I use polytetrafluoroethylene.
Some sports call it non-stick for short. Now that's cooking.
I loved being on the river. It was a place where I could really close my eyes, the way I used to when I was a kid. It brought me endless happiness as a child, but all those years I spent laughing and smiling in the river, I didn't know it was tainted. "7 months ago, I died." Okay, that's not completely fair. Let's start from the beginning. "2019. I was 18 years old. My friends and I would spend our summers in the Huron River. It was only a half hour from our houses, and there wasn't much to do where I grew up, so we went to the river. When we were kids, we'd sneak onto the train tracks, and we'd even jump off the bridges, which do not do, but the fact remains the same. We were always in the river. As we grew up, 2 of my closest friends decided to work at the canoe liveries. I joined them and gladly spent 2 summers manning the docks. But nobody told us when we swam in the river that for years it contained a deadly chemical. In the 50s, DuPont and 3M began using PFOA and PFOS, their miracle chemicals, to produce widely successful products like Teflon and Scotchgard. PFOA and PFOS are types of PFAS, which stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and refers to an umbrella of harmful chemicals used in industrial processes. PFAS chemicals are characterized by their resistance to heat, oil, stains, grease, and water. PFAS is used in non-stick cookware, cleaning products, water repellents, personal care products, and even fast food containers. Okay, now for the heavy part. Internal memos from 3M revealed that they knew PFAS was toxic from the beginning and continued to manufacture it. A later memo from 1975 shows evidence that 3M and DuPont were completely aware that PFAS builds up in human blood samples. Over the coming decades, factories across the country began producing products en masse made with PFAS chemicals. One of those factories was Tri-Bar Manufacturing in Wixom, Michigan. In 2008, Tri-Bar began using PFAS chemicals to manufacture automotive parts for major car companies. During that time, they dumped toxic industrial waste contaminated with PFAS into the Wixom wastewater facility. Still don't believe me? An investigation proved that Tri-Bar overrode 460 toxicity alarms. And what was the result? 10,000 gallons of hexavalent chromium dumped in the Huron. I guess Tri-Bar was inspired by Aaron Brockovich. PFAS has been shown to cause thyroid disease, liver damage, kidney cancer, and fertility issues, among other diseases. It's known as a forever chemical because of its inability to break down in the environment, including our bodies. The CDC estimates that 97% of Americans have PFAS in their bloodstream. including you. The river was slowly being poisoned, just like my blood. In late 2022, I was diagnosed with an acute form of leukemia. It was an aggressive and rare form of cancer, and my life was shattered. Through a grueling 9 months of intensive treatment, a 4-week medically induced coma, and a bout with pneumonia that nearly took my life, I received a life-saving procedure called ECMO. My body was left scarred, mentally and physically. Over the next 4 months, I went through intensive physical therapy to regain my strength. But I still had questions. All good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. There we go. Okay. Spread this out. We have this. Okay. Time to see what's in my blood. What do you think? What? Yeah?
You're
Cut.
My name is Sandy Winstelt. I'm a psychologist that lives in Belmont, just north of Grand Rapids.
All right, so what are we looking at right here?
Well, this used to be a 70-acre Christmas tree farm, which is part of why we bought the property, because it was across the street from a Christmas tree farm. However, it turned out that it was actually owned by Wolverine Worldwide, and it's where they would bring truckloads of tannery waste from their Hush Puppy Shoes factory, dig trenches, and dump it in there. Sometimes they couldn't find which place to dump it, per se, if that makes sense. So they would just dump it anywhere up here, wherever they could, especially if it was snowy, if they couldn't get down a road, they would just back it up and dump it. They came by the neighborhood one day and asked if they could test my groundwater, that there was concerns that there was a contaminant. They were searching for this PFAS chemical, which I had never heard of ever. And they were going to send a crew out in a few days. When they came out, they were literally wearing a hazmat suit to test the water. There's nothing more scary than seeing people come to test your water wearing a hazmat suit. So they tested my water. About 2 weeks later, I get a call from the health department asking if I could meet with them to talk about the results. I've worked in government long enough to know when they want to come into your home to give you results, it's not because they have good news to share. If they didn't find anything, they would have just sent me a postcard that said, we found nothing. When they pulled up, there were 3 cars. There were 6, 7 people maybe. We sat around the table and they gave me my results. The first test they came back was like 26,000 parts per trillion. To most people, that means nothing because nobody understands this chemical, especially at that time. They explained that the health advisory level that the EPA had set, the maximum contaminant level was 70 parts per trillion, and I was at 26,000 or whatever. They thought that that must have been an error because they'd never seen drinking water that high. So they came back out and did another sample. That one came back at 38,000 parts per trillion. And it was at that point that everything started kind of falling apart as far as them realizing not just the scope of the contamination, but how far it had traveled. The people at the health department were kind of giving me 2 sides. They were kind of saying it's nothing to worry about. We don't know a lot about this chemical. There are some studies that show it's related to some things: thyroid disease, kidney cancer, testicular cancer, liver disease. And I remember stopping them and saying, liver disease, gosh, it's weird. My husband just died of liver cancer a year ago. And you could see the looks across the table, and you knew then that it had just gotten real, that people, I think, were starting to grasp the gravity of the situation. And we were getting ready for me to start cutting back on my hours so we could travel. And I remember we met with our financial advisor, who said, I think that'll work. And we went out to celebrate and had a really good dinner. And then he got so sick that night, just so sick, to the point I thought he was having a heart attack. So he went in on like March 1st for a hernia repair. But when he came out, it turned out he had stage 4 liver cancer. Those 3 weeks were just an absolute whirlwind, because I don't know there's ever a good way to pass. And I don't know if having it go shorter made it easier because it didn't drag it on. But I think it also made it harder because you didn't get to say the things or do the things that you wanted to do. When you have liver cancer, it's not a very kind way to go. It's a very painful way to go. And he died just like 6 weeks before our 25th anniversary. We are a country now that has said any chemical that we manufacture is great until we find out it's not great. And that's a stupid way to do it. At least in Europe, they say any chemical that we make that we don't know how to destroy, that will last in our environment forever, has to be closely regulated and monitored. We don't do that in this country. And so maybe we need to start thinking about how we regulate chemicals and toxins different. We've got to start deciding the free market is going to take care of it. This is a good example of how the free market didn't take care of us. Tobacco was a good example of how the free market didn't take care of us. Asbestos was a good example. We have the examples. We just need to start learning from them.
Kind of grinds it up. I look like soap suds in a way. And foam is at incredibly high levels of PFAS, which makes me concerned that, so that's why we really push to have them put signs up here, because you have not just fishers, people that fish here, but they eat the fish, and now we have a do not eat advisory for a lot of the fish here. But we have kayakers, we have, people that canoe on this. I mean, this is an incredible river that flows into the Grand, which flows into Lake Michigan. A lot of the west side of the state gets its water source from the Grand River and Lake Michigan. And this is flowing directly in there. When this all happened on House Street, the EPA became back involved with this site as well. And forced Wolverine to dig up everything. I mean, you could walk along here where that big tree is. You could just pull out handfuls of leather scraps. There may still be some in there, I don't know. Handfuls of leather scraps that they had to dig up and dispose of. It was a mess. It was a real mess. But I think there's more to come. Oops.
Alarming study on cancer and young people. We're talking about younger than 50 years old. Cases worldwide have shot up by nearly 80% in the past 30 years, and cancer is killing more young people than ever. CBS's Janet Shamlian looks at what's behind this.
My test results came back, and just like every other American, I have PFAS coursing through my body. In my blood, my tissue, my organs, my bones, and my brain. But here's where the waters get murky. I can't prove that PFAS caused my leukemia, but I know that PFAS kills. I just don't know when, and I don't know how. But it begs the question, why are so many kids of my generation suddenly drowning in a river of cancer? And what are we going to do about it?